So, today, first day of the Scouting Grounds event officially. There are no broadcasted matches today, but this is the first day that the teams are kind of officially together and starting their scrims and getting used to each other and things like that. So, it's an exciting day. It's a fun time. Some stuff is getting announced. We had the Mobalytics kind of micro website for Scouting Grounds go live. I've been contributing to that on a certain level, helping to kind of make some improvements to the site that they'd done for last year and in the structure, layout, content of it. And then what I'm really excited about is the power rankings that we've set up. So I contributed my own set of power rankings. Those people who subscribe on the Patreon have actually seen these a couple days ago. I didn't, I put that out on the Patreon for subscribers there, but didn't want to leak it too widely publicly because I wanted to make sure Mobalytics had a chance to get those out first, kind of in a public sense. But those are there. Pastry Time also contributed his own rankings, and then the Mobalytics data team put together their rankings, purely data-based, based on solo queue performances and so on from the players. Thanks, Winters Ward. Power ranking me as the highest analytic guy. That's an official title. I'll try to print that into up with my diplomas on the wall if I can. That'd be awesome. So we took the averages of those three rankings from myself, from Pastry Time, and from the Mobalytics AI, and came up with overall ranks for all 20 players. And I want to go through those on the stream today. I'm going to go through kind of my thoughts on the 20 players, where I put them each, and where they landed overall between the three. And then I'm going to call in Prussian, who is a member of the Discord community. If you guys aren't on the Discord, you should definitely jump in there and hang out with us. Prussian has been hanging out there with us, and he does a lot of content of his own, which is really cool, and has been on analyst desks for any amateur broadcasts, and so definitely want to get his take on where he agrees or disagrees or sees opportunities for a bit of a different look on some of these players as well. So should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing it. As we get that set up, I'm going to swap the screen over here. And before Bjergsen makes the top 20 again, these analysts always overhype him. Can you imagine Bjergsen playing in the Scouting Grounds circuit Scouting Grounds event with these guys? That'd be a lot of fun. Last hurrah. That'd be like I was going to say like a bronze to challenger stream, but that's a little extreme. More like a diamond 1 to challenger stream, maybe. I don't know. I don't think the gap between him and these guys is that big, actually. Hey, thanks for the congrats as the bull turns. Thanks for wishing me good luck. It should be a really fun event. Also, just as an extra little nugget here, it looks like, I think it's like 99% confirmed I'm going to be on Hotline League tonight, so don't leak that. Let Travis announce it himself, but that'll be fun. Cool. So let's switch over here. And I'm going to put the link to this in the chat as well. You should be able to go to... Actually, I can't even put links in chat, can I? I'm not sure if I can. I'm going to try it. Let me make sure I get the exact right URL here. So if you want to go to the Mobalytics site, it is here. There you go. I can put links in my own chat. That's nice. If you guys want to scroll through it on your own, there are kind of profiles in the players. There are obviously the power rankings that we're going to go through. There's the standings tab that is basically stats for all the players from solo queue, and then there's going to be stats from the actual Scouting Grounds matches as well once those come in. It'll be it's a great site to kind of peek through. There's a lot of depth you can get into if you kind of know where you're looking for this. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Cool. All right, so let's get into it. So what we've ended up with here, will the photos eventually fill in? So this is, I wasn't directly involved in actually building this site out, but we do have these silhouettes for all the players. Normally at this event, it would be in person. They fly them all into LA. They take good photos of them all. They physically embed press with the teams and all this kind of stuff. Because of COVID, this event is happening purely remotely this year. And so there weren't, press quality photos to work with. Chase has a good Niles photo that we can just throw in for Niles. But so unfortunately there aren't really like website quality photos for these guys, but we work with what we have. So the player that ended up number 1 on the aggregated rankings is Niles. I power ranked him number 2. Pastry also ranked him number 2, and the Mobalytics AI had him number 4. And again, this statistical ranking is based on solo queue primarily. It may have I wasn't directly involved in designing that AI ranking because I didn't want to like have it bias, have crossover between the two. But I believe this is mostly a solo queue ranking. And Tom Shuno, they have not gone through draft order. The draft order of the Dragon teams is not being made public, as far as I understand. So I put him number 2. In retrospect, as I go back on this, so I locked in my rankings for this list mid last week. I want to say like Tuesday or Wednesday. We had to lock it in at a certain point and move forward with it, and I was pretty comfortable with it, and I'm still fairly comfortable with my list. There are a few little changes I would make, and one of the changes that I would make going back is I actually would have bumped Niles up to number 1. And if you scroll down a little, you'll see my number 1 overall ended up number 2, and that was NXI. Based on what I've seen, a little bit since then and other conversations I've had, I think I would have swapped these two guys in my list, but it's not a huge deal. So what I wrote about Niles, I said Niles team fights very well, dancing in other fights to avoid enemy threat ranges and cooldowns, and selecting the right targets to attack when he finds an opening. He plays well with the lead, especially with a strong read on when to push his lane deeper, when to move onto the map to group with his team, and when to teleport into a fight. On the negative side, sometimes Niles tries to do a bit too much, which good opponents can punish. His rate of improvement over the past couple of years hasn't been the fastest, but he has been working through a college degree, so he deserves some leeway on that point. So my write-up doesn't feel like a number 1, number 2 write-up, to be honest. But, I think I tried to balance it between positives and negatives. But I do feel really good about this guy. I think he is by far the best top laner at the event. I think he's got a level of poise and polish to him that a lot of these players don't have. And what's really hard to find at this event, I think overall, for what it's worth, this is probably the strongest lineup of 20 players we've had at these events over the past several years. But it is hard to find players at this event who both have a lot of room to grow and a ton of potential, and also have a pretty high level of polish on, the amount of experience they've had, how well they just understand the game at a fundamental level rather than just having mechanics or having, being good on a few champions. I'm quite impressed from having watched. I've watched, Niles kind of on public VODs from amateur matches, also a little bit kind of behind the scenes, listened to a little bit of his comms and things like that. And I have been quite impressed, especially like what I think of when I think of Niles is him playing like a Camille, something like that, and knowing how to play his split push role, which is one of the most kind of strategically complex roles, I would say, is knowing, how to manage the side lane wave relative to what the rest of the team is doing, when to get that wave pushing, how to synchronize it with the rest of the map, when to expose yourself, when not to expose yourself. And, for a player at this level, I was quite impressed with the decision making he's able to make on that front. Pastry had a write up there as well, also feels very good at him. So I think there's a lot of agreement on this player, and he's definitely a deserving kind of number 1 overall. Rank 2 overall. So this is who I'd put number 1. I'd probably bump him down to number 2. In hindsight, we have an XI jungler at the event. Pastry ranked him number 4 overall, and the Mobalytics AI put him at a 9. What I wrote, NXI is the physical incarnation of Lee syndrome. That's both his greatest strength and his biggest weakness. I'm not sure he's ever landed a Nidalee javelin without transforming into a cougar and leaping in behind it afterwards. Kidding aside, when NXI's aggression pays off, it's impressive to see, and it works more often than it fails, at least at the amateur level. The main question is how well he can adapt to a higher level of opposition and rein himself in, adding more calculation and deeper game knowledge to his toolkit. So basically, NXI is one of the players I see as high level of potential and room to grow, not the highest level of polish yet. Definitely needs to kind of, back off of a lot of plays and kind of pick his moments and read the situations a little better. Hey, Tim Ding, how's it going? Also, that reminds me, I do want to throw in thank you, CS Warrior, for renewing your sub. You had a gifted sub before, and you renewed it for another month, so really appreciate that. Yeah. So NXI, I think, he's pretty easy to see as kind of this stereotypical, high mechanics, lots of room to grow in his game sense, got to dial it in a little more kind of jungler. And I think he fits that kind of stereotype pretty well. Really, really interested to see what he ends up doing, how well he ends up growing, whether he continues to play with 100 Thieves next or does something else next year. Yeah. You renewed it for 6 months, Chase. Wow. Awesome. Thank you very much. They're saying he's more Spica than Blabber. Yeah, Spica has a lot of that. He doesn't have this quite the same level, I'd say, of killer instinct as Blabber. And NXI has a very high killer instinct, but yeah, I don't know. It's hard to make direct comparisons on that. I think I put in. There are going to be some posts going out, and on certain players we kind of picked comparables for them in the LCS. I would say Blabber and Spica are both reasonable kind of comparables for who NXI could become, but yeah, a little, he's his own player too. So moving on down the list, number 3, the aggregate for number 3 was Copy. And I ended up putting number 4 on my list. Pastry had him at number 12, so there's a pretty big disagreement here. And the Mobalytics AI had him number 2, so his solo queue primarily, and also his amateur stats quite good. Yeah, I don't have to read through the full things that I wrote as well. You guys can also, I linked to the website, and you can go through and read through the whole thing. So I also don't want to take too long going through this entire list and realizing 20 of these players, so I want to get Prussian in here in a little bit as well. So yeah, I from what I've seen, Copy is kind of, I think I described him as a fill in the gaps mid laner. A lot of control mage play. He's more he's more about seeing what his team needs and kind of stepping into that. When a fight breaks out, he's going to go in and do his role in that fight. He's going to play out his lane more or less the way he's supposed to. But the main thing that I've seen, both from watching myself and then speaking to others who have watched him more closely, he lacks a little bit of the killer instinct and aggression that you'd want to really kind of step out and dominate at the level that you'd hope. So I think that's probably something that maybe Pastry indexed a little more into, that lack of a killer instinct, the lack of really big flashiness and high ceiling plays. But I do think he's really solid. I think killer instinct is a little bit hard to coach, but I think it's possible. And I thought, yeah, the level of consistency and solidness that I saw without big, it's one thing to be consistent and then, one out of every 10 plays is a big throw, but the rest are really good. I didn't see those big throws really. So I feel good about him. Yeah, a Po Belter to kind of a profile is the comparable that I think I would choose for him. So there is some debate about whether Copy is really the best mid laner at the event. We'll speak to that in a minute as well, though. The overall rank 4 we ended up with, and there's a bunch of disagreement on this player as well. APA, always plan ahead without the D. So this is a guy who, the first thing I called out was his really unique champion pool. He really likes to play comfort picks. Aurelion Sol is what he's really known for, but there are a bunch of other things that he plays a lot of, Talia, Cho'Gath, some things like that. And so, I think the big disagreement between me and Pastry put him number 1 overall. Really impressed with APA. I'm not so much. I think the big difference here is how much you are either concerned about or maybe even have some pride in his the way he plays his champion pool. And Pastry in his write-up talks about how he really likes, he's remembering back to who he be having this pocket Aurelion Sol, and he thinks that's a big positive and shows, ability to understand and play the map. I landed in a different place on that. I think I'd much rather have a player at this level who, it's fine to have a pocket pick, but I'd really like to see a lot more of an ability to, he does play some of the meta champions, Orianna and Syndra and stuff, but I don't think he plays them nearly as well as his pocket picks. That concerns me a little. And I think he's going to need to do something really special this event on non-Aurelion Sol and those kind of type champions to kind of win me over. So I personally don't think he's going to live up to this number 4 overall rank. But others have different opinions. We then end up with Yanbi, ranked 5th overall. Some pretty big disagreements here as well, but the big standout is that the Mobalytics AI had him number 1. He's done some huge stuff in solo queue, really climbed up the ladder a lot and been really impressive. I ranked him 10th on my list. Pastry Time ranked him 8th, and this is one of the players. I'd say there are 2 or 3 players. It says the lists are flawed, and Tim should have been rank 1. Oh man, the rank 1 silver 4 analyst in North America. 2 or 3 players that I would go back and probably revise my rankings on a little bit, and Yanbi is one of them. I found it really, really difficult to track down good info about Yanbi, and especially VODs to watch. I think I was able to watch 2 of his games from 6 months ago, and a lot of what has made him stand out has been solo queue, which I'm definitely not an expert in learning from solo queue and studying that, and it's much harder to kind of track down real value in those. So it's something that you learn a lot more about over time. And my personal input in this mostly came from spamming VOD review and spamming conversations with experts in the scene over the last like 3 weeks. So it's really hard to pick up a good read on a kind of a solo queue first player. And based on learning some more things after these were locked in, and also a lot of the feedback and conversations I've had with kind of scene experts since then, I definitely had Yanbi too low. But I didn't have them that much lower than Pastry did. So overall, I do think this is a player who can kind of jump out ahead and do better than Pastry and I both put him in. I think there's going to be a lot of buzz about this guy. I think there's a chance that he could prove to be the best mid at the event, but there's just a little harder to be kind of confident in that. Yahweh Liver wants to know, thanks for making me say that name out loud, how does the AI work? So I don't have all of the under the hood details of it, but it's basically, I believe it's mostly powered by the Gamer Performance Index that Mobalytics runs. So if you go to the site yourself and click into the player profiles here, you can see their GPI, they call it, and there's some other aspects. I think they tweaked it for this as well, so it's not exactly just off the GPI, but basically, expected performances in given champions and given roles and how their actual performances and things like that. Okay, moving on, number 6. Because we're doing this nice and slow, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. A lot of disagreement here. Number 6 overall aggregate power ranking is Shady. I personally had him 16. So big difference. Big difference. Pastry had him 5. The Mobalytics AI had him 3. So, obviously there's a big difference, I'd say, in what Shady has managed to do kind of in solo queue and statistically versus what I have seen from him in kind of stage play. And Pastry also feels pretty good about Shady. From what I've seen, and again from speaking to others who are more experts in this, he does have pretty good engage sense and playmaking. Rakan, Thresh, Bard, Nautilus, those kinds of things. Engage champions, hook champions. But I think the support pool at this event is probably the weakest of the 5 positions, and Shady is not the best support at the event. So I definitely don't. I feel on my front that I wouldn't have put him that high. He's had some experience in the past. Maybe this is a chance for him to kind of break back in and break through, but he should be one of the more polished players, and he should be a little closer to his ceiling at this point. I think players can always kind of break through and find new ceilings and all that, but I don't know. I just haven't seen anything that really twigged me to Shady being one of those. So, but that's where he landed in the aggregate ranking. Aggregate ranking number 7, we're going to go a little bit the other direction here. Shoryu, is this the first bot laner we've seen? I think it is. And this is really interesting because, in my opinion, bot lane is the strongest position at this event. I put Shoryu at number 3, Pastry had him 7, and the Mobalytics AI had him 16. So you can tell Shoryu, based on this, maybe not the strongest mechanical or solo queue type player, but what he's doing in his actual kind of amateur or competitive matches is a little more impressive, right? What I tend to see from him in strengths is his ability to kind of play out mid game and late game situations, team fighting, positioning, really good game knowledge, so like really high polish. His mechanics in general are fine, but I'd say his laning is not the best. So if you had to kind of put a profile on him, if you want to go really extreme, you go to like a Bang type player, somebody who is not really expected to go out there and crush his lane, but he's so solid later on. He's going to carry you in the team fights. You give him some openings. On a North American level, that'd be someone more like a Cody Sun. If you don't want to get too extreme in, how high of a player you're comparing him to. But yeah, he could be really good. I think given the laning kind of matchups and so on at this event, he should come out fine. I think the main thing he's going to have to improve on to kind of jump up a little higher in everyone's opinions is, can he lane well against Academy duo lanes? Can he lane well, against LCS duo lanes eventually at that point? But he's got the potential to do that. And this is a player who was around a little bit, kind of went away for a bit, took some time away, came back, and is kind of rising back up again. So a player to definitely keep an eye on. Rank 8 overall. This is another one with a lot of disagreement. Tony Top. So Tony's a really interesting player. From what I understand, and I'm not an expert in kind of his backstory or life story, but I understand, Chinese player who has Canadian, not sure, citizenship or permanent residency, but, kind of became official North American residency. Has some really good hands, really good skill and mechanics. Likes to play the carries. From what I've seen, I haven't been super impressed with this tank game, but others have said it's fine. I think he has a somewhat similar profile to Niles in terms of kind of play style, strengths, and weaknesses. His Jax, Chase is pointing out, is definitely kind of his signature pick from what I've seen. I don't think he's as good at reading how to move his side lanes. He's less confident about knowing when to push or when to pull back, when to kind of hide or move out or group on the map, things like that. So he's not at the same level as Niles in that. And I'm, I think a lot of people would say I have him a little too low. Obviously, Pastry would definitely say I have him way too low. See you later, Winter's Ward. Thanks for popping by. But I think, he doesn't really inspire me that much. But who knows? Like, especially if he gets champions he's comfortable on, he could pop off at this event. So we'll have to see. And he's been pretty good in the statistical perspective. Rank 9, we've got Yeon, the next bot laner at this event. So Yeon played for 100 Thieves next, and a similar, in some ways kind of similar to Copy in the sense of like, pretty solid, relatively conservative, doesn't really make a bunch of mistakes, come in and kind of like fill in team fights and play those through. So, from what I've seen, I describe him as kind of the measured, intelligent kind of a player. But he does have some killer instinct to kind of see something is opening up. He steps into that gap. He tries to close out the fight. So again, another player, kind of like Shoryu, a little bit of that Cody Sun profile to me, but a little more leaning into the classic Wild Turtle. Like, he's ready to jump into something if it's there. In a few cases, he kind of has to pull back a little and goes a little too hard, goes a little too far. But, he's an interesting all-around player. I'm definitely hoping to see a lot more of him. I ranked him 6th overall. Pastry had him 10th. And the AI had him at 13. So overall aggregate rating of 9. Again, bot lane being probably the strongest position of this event. I think we'd probably put him 2nd overall, maybe somewhere like that. I had him as the 2nd best bot laner at this event. So I believe I did anyways. And yeah, could be pretty good. Then we move on to Otto. So in the aggregate rankings, Otto is in as the 2nd best support behind Shady. In my personal rankings, I have him in as the best support here. Otto is a player who you might recognize from playing some bot lane for CLG Academy a while ago. He role swapped to support early in 2020, so he hasn't been playing support for that long, like 6-7 months, I think. And he's done okay in that role. The bot lane that he played was Otto and Phil at support. So I think they name changed together to make that Otto Phil bot lane. It was fun times. He's done okay. Pastry and I both have him at a 9. I've had a little bit of pushback that he could be a little higher. I've had a little pushback he could be a little lower. I think there's potential for him to move up a little. Obviously not having that much time in support yet, there's going to be opportunity to still kind of learn his matchups better, learn his mechanics a little better, how to be comfortable on a wider range of support champions. I think he's okay. I think he's all right. Maybe he's going to be worth an academy team taking a shot on. He doesn't blow me away, though. But, probably the best support of the event, in my opinion. Not necessarily in others' opinions. I'll, keep an eye on him. I think he should be pretty good at helping his Scouting Grounds team do well, because he is a little bit of that kind of player from what I've seen. Kind of gluing the team together and carrying them forward. So, worth watching for sure. Not a bad player. Rodov is next in the aggregate rankings. Aggregate ranking of 11. I had him 7, Pastry time 13, and the AI had him 15. So I was the one who kind of pulled this aggregate rating for Rodov up a little bit. When I first started watching Rodov's games, I was pretty underwhelmed, to be honest. And some of this was about which games I happened to see first and which ones are second and so on. The first ones that I saw, he was kind of playing more of a tank utility role. He was doing okay in it, but not standing out. But then as I walked in, so I initially slotted him in pretty low on my list, lower than this. Excuse me. But as I watched some more of his games, I started to see him on a bit more of a wide profile of champions. I started to see him pop off a little more often. I still lean towards seeing him as a bit more of a kind of stable conservative player rather than the big pop-off carry like a Niles. But the more I watched of him, the more my opinion of him has gone up. There's some debate whether I should have him as high as a 7. I think there are some other players, like if I went back to it, I'd probably move Yanbi a little higher and put him more into this kind of 7 range or something like that, and bump Rodov down a little. But I do think he could be quite good, and is definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Not on the same level as Niles, but could compete to be kind of maybe in that second best top laner kind of a position. Rank 12. We end up with Spawn. Not to be confused with the Oceanic Spawn caster coach. This is Spawn, has sometimes spelled his name with 3 W's. And he's a guy who rounds, part of this strong set of bot laners. Spawn is, he strikes me as one of these very, very raw players. Seems to have really high mechanics, and it has impressed me on that front. I've kind of been behind the scenes for some games that he's played, and he's super quiet. Definitely needs to break out some of his kind of confidence and ability to communicate more and like say what he needs and call for what he wants, rather than just letting the team kind of do what they need. He needs to move on from just he's going to make a play and then he tells you, I'm doing this right now, rather than I'm going to do this and I'm going to need that in a minute and things like that, like thinking a little further ahead of the game. But those are things that I think are relatively easy to coach. And those are the kinds of things that I expect a young, unpolished player to come in and need help with. And what I'd hope is that, he's got some aggression, he's got some mechanics, he's got some potential to outplay, and yeah, he has those things. Spawn is probably one of the 2 or 3 players that I'm most personally excited about at the event to see what can he do, what can he learn, how much can he grow over the course of this thing, because there's a lot of opportunity for him to really jump up. And so I put him 8 overall. Pastry had him 18. I guess he didn't see the same things that I did. And the AI had him 10th. And yes, the LCS just put out on Twitter just now the actual Dragon teams, and we also have them labeled in the site here. So if you want to jump in for there, or I'm going to pull it in because Porlix just linked it in the Discord. I'll drop this in chat so people can go and see the actual Dragon teams all in one place. Yeah. All right, from Spawn we go to Tomio. Here's one where Pastry and I both had him ranked pretty low on our list. I had him 14, Pastry had him 17, but the Mobalytics AI really liked what he did in solo queue to qualify into the event. So he ended up with an aggregate rank of 13. Tomio is another player that I had trouble getting a really good scouting read on. Not much video to watch. I watched through some of his solo queue and things like that, and I just figured, he seems to have some potential, some skill, definitely not polished yet. Need to see him move past some, and this might just be from watching him in solo queue and stuff, but it seems like he has some potential to tilt at times, things like that. So maybe coaching will be really good for him and he can really round into more form and jump up the list. For now, I'm not as convinced about him as I am about some of the other junglers of the event. But Tomio, jungler, rank of 13 for now. And yeah, he's got a really close relationship with Johnson, and they duo a lot for what it's worth. RoseThorn is a guy who, look at this disparity. I ranked him 5th overall, which I think there's some pretty good reason people might push back on that and say it's a little too high. Pastry had him 14th, and the Mobalytics AI had him 19th. Whew. So he ends up with a rank of 14. He ends up below Tomio in the overall rankings, but I feel on my personal order that RoseThorn I would put much higher than Tomio. RoseThorn is another one of these, he's kind of like the jungle version of Spawn in a sense, tons of potential, tons of raw ability in my mind, but really minimal competitive experience, not as much time kind of being coached and being able to round into that polish. I really like his attitude and communication and his ability to kind of think about what he wants to do next, talk to his team about, options and say, what are we going to do? Are we going to try this? Are we going to try that? He's done a lot of things from what I've seen that have really impressed me, and I think he's going to benefit a ton again at this event from the coaching and so on. But he does need to kind of pull back some of his aggression on the map at times, trying to go in for, buff steals and invades and so on when he doesn't quite have the map set up for it, stuff like that. That, again, coachable things. I think all the things that I want to see from RoseThorn are coachable things, so that makes me kind of really excited for him. But he ended up with an aggregate rank of 14. I feel he should have been higher myself. Zune, who up until this event was going with the name Iconic. He was playing with Maryville, along with Niles and others there. And this is a guy, I mentioned that that Yanbi is one of the players that I, in hindsight, after my rankings are locked and gathering a little more info for that, I probably would have had Yanbi higher. Zune is another one of those. Based on what I saw in the games that I reviewed and the things that I learned about him, I was, I thought he seemed okay. He seemed fine, kind of middle of the ranking, 13 or maybe a little bit higher. Based on talking to a lot of other people's impressions of him, it's much more positive, and would drive his ranking much higher. So this is a player who, based on things that I'm seeing and hearing, has a very good chance of outperforming this power rank, and ending up potentially as the best jungler at the event. So we will see whether that actually ends up happening. Have to wait and see. I'm not as convinced as some of the people who have told me I should be. So, we're going to have to wait and see for myself whether I actually agree with sliding him way up the list. But there is definitely some pressure that people are saying he should be much higher up the list. So we will find out on that. 16, we're getting near the end here. Captain Shrimps. I had him at 19, Pastry 15, Mobility XAI at 8, and that kind of moved him up to an overall aggregate of 16. This is another guy who, kind of like APA, seems to have a bit of a personal champion pool that he's really comfortable on, a lot of Rumble mid, and also played a lot of Karma, Swain, and then, as I said in my write-up, the closest he gets to consistent on-meta choice is a Galio. A little bit of Zoe and Oriana, but he definitely seems much more comfortable on his own core champion pool, which is something that if you're going to succeed in solo queue up to a certain level, it'll get you there. But to transition from solo queue into competitive environment, I think you need to be. I'm not a huge fan of the idea that you move into an academy team, say, and learn how to play the meta champs. I think you need to know them first. You want to get coached on your overall game knowledge, not your champion knowledge at that level. So, I'd like to see. I really hope that at the Scouting Grounds event, he doesn't play too much Rumble, play 1 or 2 games of it, but prove that you can hang on the meta. And if you can play the meta champions, and show strong fundamentals, then, maybe you'll win me over a little bit. 17 is Joey. And here's another massive swing. I had Joey 20th on my list. And I do want to say, and some people are pointing this out in chat already, falling in the bottom few ranks in this list is something you have to take with a grain of salt, because, as I said off the top, this is probably the strongest set of overall players we've had at a Scouting Ground so far. So a player who might have landed 18, 19, 20 on the power rankings for this could very well have been mid-tier or even a little better in some of the other Scouting Grounds events we've run. They should all be very proud to be here. So Joey is someone who, I don't know. I don't want to dwell on it too long. I don't really feel that convinced that he's able to do a lot better than we've seen from him in past kind of showings at the academy level or other things. He didn't really do much with Wildcard Gaming this year to get too far. When I watched his play, nothing really stood out to me. Like, he seems like a decent support. He's kind of fine. He earned his way to the event, and good for him. But I don't know. He's not the player who's really convinced me out of this. And given that support is kind of a weaker role at the event, I think he falls kind of near the bottom of that role as well. But still a decent player, a player who deserves to be at the event, and hope that he will find success. Coming into the last 3 here. Plucks. And in Paster's write-up, he said it's intended to be pronounced Flux. I'm probably just going to end up saying Plucks, and we'll see what kind of casters say. You'll have to work on convincing me to go with Flux instead of Plucks, because, man, you can't just decide a letter says a different sound. Come on, guys. I've heard some pretty good communication from him. I've seen him kind of following the right steps mentally, sharing the right information, playing out some things pretty okay. But but he definitely needs more time, in my opinion, to kind of gain comfort in a competitive environment and in a more structured environment. I think he'll learn a ton at this event. I think he can, compete with Joey and might be, I think he definitely has a little more opportunity to kind of have a higher potential than Joey and kind of be someone you'd bring in and try to develop further. But didn't really win me over overall. And I definitely, I hope that he can grow a ton from the start to the finish of this event. And if he does, I'll be really excited about that. And probably, in my opinion, probably see him in amateur again next year and hope that he has another great year of growth. 19 was AndyBendy, and I had him 11 on my list. So AndyBendy, I think we've kind of all put him at the bottom of the 4 bot laners rankings. Something like, Shoryu, Yeon, Spawn, AndyBendy, or maybe you switch around between Yeon and Spawn, something like that. But all of that being said, like when I first started watching AndyBendy this year, I was actually really impressed. I thought he was doing really well. I think he was probably the brightest point on his team playing for Radiance, and not so much a highlight reel player, but like a really good kind of cleanup guy, really reliable, which is something I value in that role. So I think he's actually quite good. I think he should definitely be higher on this list in my opinion, but Pastry ranked him lower. The AI had him a little lower. And I'm not going to contest that too hard. I think there are reasons that people might have kind of seen some issues in his play that maybe I didn't notice in games that I haven't watched, things like that. But I do think that from what I have seen, I think he's a pretty good player. I think he might not show off the most this event if people are just comparing head to head because the overall role is so strong in bot lane. But his personal level of play in isolation, I think is actually quite good. Maybe worth an academy spot, maybe not, kind of on the edge there, which I think is given that only 10 of these players get drafted at all at the end of the event, and a handful of them might end up in academy. I think that's a pretty good place to be overall. Finally, the aggregate rank of 20. There's some weirdness with this guy's name because I think he uses a capital I to represent an L in his name. When I first read it, I thought it was Gibbel, but most people are saying Gibbel, and I'm going to go along with that. So Gibbel is along with Yanbi and Tomio, the player that I had the hardest time kind of getting down. Oh, Gibbel is a Pokemon, apparently. All right, thanks, Jason. Now I know. I don't play Pokemon. But yeah, it was really hard to track down good insight on him, but it seems like from what I saw, I felt decent. Seemed like he could do okay, and that there was kind of some room to grow and show off more. He's got a really strong set of, as Tom Shu was pointing out, a really strong set of top laners to go up against that is going to be a little tough for him to stand out. But I do think he is better than some of the other players here and has some good potential and a lot of room to grow. So I had him 15, Pastry 20th, and the AI 20th, and he ended up at the 20th overall as a result. So that's what I thought. Now, what we're going to do here is get some thoughts from another person who didn't officially contribute to this, but has been following the amateur scene. And I'm just going to take a quick break, and then I'll set up the tech in a second here, and we're going to get Prussian to call in and get his sense and where he would rank some of these players as well. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes here. All right, everyone, we are back again. I have got Prussian on the line. Prussian, you want to say hello? Sorry,
good evening.
Unmute the system audio. There we go. Say hello again.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here.
Yeah, if you guys can't hear Prussian that well, let me know and I can tweak the audio levels, but it should be good. So Prussian, maybe you could give a bit of an idea to the people who are watching about, what possible reason could there be for getting you in to talk about Scouting Grounds power rankings with me?
So I was the head analyst of High Lambs and an amateur team, Radiance. I worked very closely with the guys, showed up to all the scrims, showed up to all the practices, did external scouting on a lot of the teams in Scouting Grounds. So my birth of games, I'm not super sure how much you and Pastry Time have watched, but I've watched most of the games that we play and most all of the stream games. So I'd say my sample size is rather larger than most of yours. In addition, I'm also relatively high rank on the solo queue ladder. So I have some personal experience playing against some of these guys, so
How high
I
are
have
we
first-hand
talking?
experience.
Because everybody knows that an analyst is only as good as their scouting or solo queue rank. So how high are we talking?
We're talking all around low grandmaster, so I'm not super high. I definitely don't play as actively as I used to, as I'm in university at this point, pursuing a degree in biology pre-medicine. So not so much time for League of Legends.
So you're 1 or 2 tiers above me.
Maybe a little bit. You could get there. Maybe buy some veteran
Right.
coaching.
So we've got a real analyst on the line, guys. Somebody who's high in solo queue. No, but seriously, Prussian, you've been on analyst desks for like the Upsurge Grand Finals, for example, as well. Been around the scene. You do your own content. I believe you have a YouTube channel, correct?
Yes, that's true. I've been around the block.
What's the link to your YouTube channel?
You can check me out. Channel name is Prussian. I don't have enough subscribers yet to get a custom link, but we're working towards it. Definitely on the list for 2021.
Cool. Everybody make sure you look that up and subscribe to that channel. Check out his content that he's done in the amateur scene. So excited to have you on here. Would love to get your take on kind of these power rankings that we came up with. I'm not sure what order we want to do this. Do you just want to scroll from the list, give your thoughts on the players and where you'd rank them? Do you have a unified list of your own that you'd kind of want to run through? That might be the best approach if you have it.
Yeah, I have my own list, so I feel
Let's
like
start
we
at
can
20 on yours. I think that's kind of fun.
Okay. My last place, no offense to any of these players, obviously, I had Plucks on my 10th.
Okay.
So,
and, yeah, reasoning there?
I think Plucks is the weakest player here. I think he is definitely one of the more green supports. Personally, on Radiance, there was a point that this was pretty publicized where the rules changed and Cow, which was our original starting support, did not really want to compete as much because he wanted to focus on solo queue and maybe get scouted through solo queue since he wasn't eligible for going into scouting grounds. So
that's interesting. Was that before or after he had played with TL Academy? Cowhead.
That was after, because all of the scouting ground stuff started after spring split.
Right.
So the announcement was if you played in the spring split of NA Academy, you were not allowed to qualify to scouting grounds 2020. So after that, we tried out a few supports because they opened up the window for replacements. We tried out Fizzy, who's another solo queue support, and we also tried out Plucks. And obviously that was a while ago, but while Plucks he definitely isn't a bad support. He's not a terrible player, but he's definitely quiet in communications. Whereas Cow was a very vocal support, and perhaps that just didn't work well with our team. But we definitely, or personally, I prioritize a support with a strong voice, and I don't think Plucks really had that at that point. And what I've been seeing with him on TBA, what I've been hearing from Young, what I've been hearing for his coaches, was he had a lot of fundamental issues, being on weird places of the map, walking to lane through the lane, which as a support typically is not ideal because you always want to be closer relative to
going through mid
jungle,
or at least going through jungle to give yourself the option.
Yes, precisely. So those sort of autopilot tendencies that we were looking at made me place him towards 20th. I don't think he's a terrible player, but I definitely think that he has a lot of work to do towards gearing himself towards a more competitive 5v5 mindset as opposed to just solo queue.
Sure. So who would you have next slot up? Who would you have at 19?
Next slot up is Captain Shrimps. You talked about it briefly, and I share a lot of your sentiment, where he is known for having a very strange pool. Beyond just Rumble, he's I remember playing against his LeBlanc. I'm blanking now, but he has a few of those other strange picks.
In competitive, he pulled out like Karma and Swain.
Yeah, Karma, Swain, Galio too.
Yeah.
Something that he did a lot on life support with Jazzy. The most banned champion against that team was Rumble, and the reasoning was their dominant strategy was they would always pick this 2v2 J4 Rumble, and since Syndra was super meta, and these other immobile mid laners like Orianna or even APA's Aurelion Soul, they would just try to use this synergy where J4 would ult, and then they'd layer the equalizer on top, and they would just kill the enemy mid laner over and over again.
You flash out or you die, and then next time, assuming you've flashed, we'll do it again before your flash is back.
Precisely.
Right? Pretty classic.
And beyond that 5v5 limitation, obviously his champion pool just seems a little bit small. When I
Sure.
played in collegiate, I had scrimmed against Waterloo, which was the team he was on, and he was definitely not bad, definitely one of the higher tier collegiate mid laners, but he didn't stand out to me as someone who is especially impressive. So
Yeah.
I had him 19th.
Cool. What about 18?
18, going up the list, I had Tony Top. And
Okay.
the reason why I had Tony Top so low was because while he's known for his high solo queue ranking, I think a lot of the players are pretty well known for sort of being against Tony. In retrospect, I think I might have put Gibbel a little bit lower than him. Gibbel's next one up, a little bit of a spoiler, but
Sure. Yeah.
while Tony is known for his Renekton Camille Jax and playing towards side lanes, I think that he isn't very good at controlling the side lanes. He just kind of goes into the side lane and pushes. He doesn't have a true mastery over the side lane. Well, it's kind of well known in NA solo queue, a lot of players simply ignore the side lane. Tony is halfway there where he goes to the side lane, but he doesn't have a super good mastery. He doesn't really set his waves up in advance. He's just better at utilizing the resources on the map as opposed to really being capable of commanding those resources, where a player like Niles would be a little bit better in. I know he's very commonly compared to Niles, but I think Niles is very different in the regard that I think Niles has a good degree of versatility behind him, whereas Tony Top is more stylistically limited. Like, he needs to have jungle resources in the early game. He definitely needs to have more vision put around him in the mid to late game, or else he will get caught, get collapsed on, and die. He's not super good at Ornn. He's not super good at tanks. And that was something that teams, especially us and many others, would just punish because he wasn't comfortable on the set. He wasn't comfortable on the Ornn. So even when those champions were more overpowered, we felt more comfortable leaving them up against Tony than against a team like Anu or 100X.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it makes sense, and it lines up with what I saw as well, for sure. So you had Tony at 18?
Yeah, Tony at 18 and 17.
Gibbel
I also had
17,
Gibbel. They're a little bit of a diametric opposite to Tony. Gibbel was primarily a weak side player. The biggest thing I noticed about Gibbel was on his team, which was Supernova Dark Matter, he was actually subbed out for Fire Theft, who was a Grandmaster top laner. If you're familiar with NA Amateur, you've definitely heard of Fire Theft. He's a more carry-oriented player, but he's definitely versatile. Nathan, Fire Theft is definitely more... He has options, and he was one of the more versatile players in NA Scouting Ground circuit in general. Mm-hmm. But the main reason for the substitution, in my mind, unless I'm totally wrong, I haven't talked to any of the coaching staff on...
Speculate, right?
Yeah, this is entirely speculation. But I think that since the bottom lane was almost exclusively weak side, they had Spider and St. Daniel, who were just one of the weaker bottom lanes in NASG. Xyle, who is a jungler who prefers to play towards his lanes. They had Spyrax, who was one of the better mid laners, actually. He was very, very good. But what they ended up doing is that they just ran these cookie cutter compositions a lot of the time, where they would always put Spyrax on a pick like Azir or Corki, a very hard 1v9 mid laner. Occasionally Syndra or Galio if they wanted to run a strict hard engage comp. And Gibbel was always a tank player primarily. And they had this hard point where if you camped mid lane and you shut down Spyrax, they were very limited in what they could do on the map, because they had two lanes that preferred to play weak side and a jungler who was incapable of really carrying and being a dominant force through the mid to late game. So they only could play through Spyrax. But subbing out for Fire Theft lent them a little bit more versatility in the way that they were capable of playing the game. But
something that upgrades the team, but is not necessarily a one-on-one, complete package upgrade in the player itself.
Exactly. I think that stylistic variation was ultimately a real clamping force in a lot of teams, and definitely for Supernova Dark Matter. And that's why I have Gibbel all the way on 17th, because I value that variation in players.
Yeah.
Um,
Makes sense.
the next one
All right.
on my list was Tomio. I haven't seen a lot about Tomio. I know he's C2 Meteos in solo queue.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, he's known as a Rengar player, and I actually think Rengar works in this specific jungle meta we have right now a little bit better than most junglers. He has a pretty decent matchup actually against Nidalee. I think I haven't seen it, but I would imagine he's pretty good into Lilia. Those sorts of squishy champions where he can really cheese and just get on top of, and they have a hard time disengaging. We saw that from SFM from Suning at Worlds, where even though Suning lost, SFM looked like one of the better players, and his Rengar was actually played it in the game that they won, if I recall.
Yep. No, I think they did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they won that game. That was the Rengar against Evelyn. There was like weird stuff on both sides of that game, wasn't there?
That's true. Rengar was a counter to Evelyn, if I recall. And definitely Evelyn is another jungler that Rengar can go toe-to-toe with. Otherwise, I've seen him starting to play this stuff more like the Kindred, the Graves, the Lee Sin, those sort of things.
Trying to branch out a little more meta.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that was a note that I had on him as well, that he's not too far removed from being a one trick, and needs to kind of expand that a little bit. But I think he has, from what I've seen, he has been getting that champion pool expanded. I don't think we're going to see him spamming Rengar to the extent that we might see Captain Shrimps on Rumble and APA on Australian Soul. Like, I don't think he's as locked into his pocket pick as those guys are. But it's there, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it is because a lot of the junglers are a little bit different. And I think most junglers are more comparable in the way, that mid laners are different. Like, Aurelion Sol is so fundamentally different than a lot of the other mid laners, and Rumble is a lot different than a lot of the other mid laners. But I think Rengar is a little bit more comparable in some ways to a champion like Nidalee, just in the way that they prefer to play the game. So
makes sense.
I have Tomio here because I would prefer to see more from him. I'm not super sold on where he is right now, but I think that he might actually be one of the higher mechanically inclined junglers, maybe second, just below NXI. So I definitely see a good degree of potential in him.
Cool. So let's move up the list. Who do we have next?
Right. We have Joey on 15th.
It's a good thing you're keeping track of what number we're at, because I'm not. So.
Yeah.
Joey at 15.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had him third in the support role, and I think that Joey is a little bit I'm not super sure what his stylistic variety is. He's known as a Janna player in solo queue and more inclined towards enchanters like Lulu. I mentioned Janna. I think I've seen him play Nami somewhat recently. And we saw him at MSI 2019, if I recall, where he subbed in for Ole, and his Braum was questionable. But I mean, that's the world stage, and he was an academy player, so
it's been a long time since then.
Yeah, precisely. But yeah, AD carry in general was really stacked during the Scouting Ground circuit. And we had a lot of really good AD carries not make Scouting Grounds or even Scouting Ground playoffs. We had players like Meech on Long Beach Gerb Nation, who was definitely a top 5 AD carry in my mind. We had TX Will Rule LOL, another great player, definitely the standout performer on Joey's team, which was Wildcard Gaming. And I think a lot of the strength of that lane, Joey was definitely not a bad support, but I think that TX really took control of that lane, and they were a team that were willing to do interesting things in draft. They were willing to flex around their players, send the Graves mid lane with TX playing it, and send a Mage bottom lane with Command Attack playing it. But I think that a lot of that cheese was a big deal in their success. And I think that on a team with more that's more cobbled together with less time to practice and think of these strategies, I think Joey might get exposed a little bit more. And I don't think that he's going to be allowed to blind pick these enchanter supports, especially with the meta like Pantheon, what's the
It's
other
definitely
one?
gonna just jump in
Leona.
and kill them, right?
Yeah, precisely. I think that Joey may get exposed a little bit more, and that's why I have him on 15th.
All right, moving up to 14. What do we got?
This is a controversial one, but I'll stand by this. I think Otto.
I already hate it. Oh no, okay.
Yeah.
Auto, okay.
So in retrospect, I probably should have bumped him up a little bit, but my reasoning for Otto on 14th was because he was by far the weakest mechanical player on the 100 Thieves roster prior towards their substitution for top lane jungle.
Mhm.
He clearly is the in-game leader, but I am personally not giving him any points for that. In retrospect, I probably should have, but I think
it's hard to say, right? Like
exactly.
It does depend what you're ranking them on. Are you ranking them on potential to break into LCS eventually, or are you ranking them how good they are right now and how good they're going to look during the Starting Grounds matches?
Exactly.
And that's the kind of thing where you can say he's probably going to look better right now and in the Scouting Grounds matches, but being a good shot caller doesn't mean you're likely to get into LCS, right? You get into LCS based on mechanics and fundamentals, things like that, not on being a leader.
I agree. And that was one of the things that I was really looking towards was I didn't think his ceiling could exceed much more from what we've already seen. From a personal perspective, I know that so one of the supports, I guess we'll have to backtrack a little bit, on Radiance that we were trying out, and he was going to be our starting support once Cow was stepping down, was Pocket Rhino. But obviously Pocket Rhino went to Team Liquid Academy.
Yeah.
And one of the other players, it was between 3 supports, including Pocket Rhino. It was Pocket Rhino, Otto, and one other support, which I think I'll keep private.
Fair enough.
But I think Pocket Rhino was definitely the best mechanical out of all of the supports, and it's a little bit indicative that Team Liquid Academy chose Pocket Rhino over Otto. And while I think Pocket Rhino has a lot of growing to do, especially because he was definitely a more quiet player for a lot of the time that I known him, I think while Otto can be a good leader, I don't think that he has the growth that someone like Shady can have, or just a lot of the prospects on this list in general.
Sure.
But definitely not a bad player. I probably would have placed him a little bit higher, but I don't think he's all that he's cracked up to be.
So is that all 4 supports we've been in yet, or did you have one more support higher than Otto yet?
I have Shady on top, actually, which I know you hate me for. But
we'll get to it. No, it's totally fine. We'll get to it.
Right. The next person I have on my list is APA. Always plan ahead.
So you don't have him ranked top 3 at the event?
No, personally, I don't. I definitely think he is actually stylistically limited by his champion pool. He is a bit of a jungle slave. He worked very well with Odd Orange, though, which was something that I think Supernova had the most threatening jungle mid 2v2, other than perhaps 100 Thieves next out of all of the teams in SGC, just because APA was always willing to sack mid lane waves to rotate to Odd Orange. And that resulted in Supernova having one of the lowest. They had one of the fastest game times, and they had one of the fastest first dragons out of all of the teams in Scouting Ground Circuit. Another reasoning was once Papa Chow was substituted out for Clyde, following the announcement that he also wouldn't be allowed to attend Scouting Grounds 2020 because he played in LCS. Clyde worked extremely well with APA because Clyde preferred champions like Pike, these more roaming style supports. He was definitely first to the trend with picks like Thresh, Pike, Leona. And that 3-man core of Odd Orange, APA, and Clyde really dominated the map quickly. But I don't know how APA will fare when he's not allowed to play his picks like Aurelion Sol, not allowed to play these more cheating champions mid lane. Yeah. And I believe he is... what jungler does he have? I actually... Hold on, I'll check real quick.
We can look at those teams in a second, too. They have been officially announced. Got to find the
tweet. Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen the tweet, but I don't think that AP will fare as well if he has a jungler, just as an example, like Zyle, who would prefer to play to his lanes. I think he needs a jungler that needs to be played around, like Auto Orange, like NXI. And I think that he is stylistically limited in that regard from what I've seen, at least.
Yeah. So the actual Dragon teams there, I'll drop them in the chat. We'll talk about this. This is how we'll wrap things off later. Is we'll talk about the teams. But so the actual team APA is part of is Gibbel, Zune. I'm not sure if that's how other people are saying it, but that's how I've been saying it. APA, Spawn, and Plucks. So I'd say Spawn is the kind of player you can play out to in the side lane. Zune, I'm not sure. I don't know quite enough about him to know if he's that kind of a player, but it does lean towards NXI and RoseThorn being a little more of the profile that you're talking about, in my opinion. Gibbel, not sure. Like, he's not really the Niles, the Tony Top kind of profile, hardcore carry guy.
Right.
So
I definitely
yeah, it's
agree.
hard to say.
My next one up. This is my. I believe this is my 13th or 12th. I'm sorry, I should have numbered
That's all
these.
right. No worries.
And the bottom of my 80 carry is actually Spawn.
Okay.
Not because I think he's bad. I think all of the 80 carries here are absolutely incredible. But
Yeah.
I do have Spawn as the weakest one. He was. I think I can't recall if it was you or Pastry Time who gave him flack for Polaris's poor performance. But if you look over the games and you look over a lot of the NA Scouting Ground games, I think that he was the one player that I think was really worth playing around for Polaris. I think both Frost Forest and Infectrix, which were their junglers that they played for throughout the circuit, were relatively weak and weren't super capable of being played around in the way that either Mike Young or NXI could, or even Avi as an example. Busio had some strange champion pool tendencies. I know he's a really well-defined, he has a really full champion pool in solo queue, but he didn't look really comfortable in some of these picks in Scouting Ground circuit, like Oriana, where it was just a lot of weird mistakes for someone who should be comfortable on this kind of mid lane mainstay champion. He didn't pull out the Cassiopeia as much, which was a champion that he is really infamous for in solo queue. And Flares, who was their top laner, was a player who was known for overextending. He was really flippy. He was really coin flippy. But Spawn was consistently the strongest player on his team, and he had a support who just swapped for mid lane and Julian, so not super high on the support caliber tier list. But in spite of all of this, he was one of the strongest 80 carries in the laning phase. He would always set his team over the edge, and he was the real X factor for his team. I think out of all of the 80 carries that we've seen here, Spawn definitely has the highest carrying capacity, but I'm not super sure how he will fare if he's not given this attention, not given all the side waves. He has to play more of a weak side. I'm not super sold on him yet. From a personal perspective, I've played against Spawn since 2018, and even back then, something I'd always used to say was, I think in another universe, in an alternate dimension, this guy could have been tactical because they were around the same power level back in 2018. I think tactical was definitely a little bit better. He would just do things with his wave that a lot of teams just wouldn't. Like, he had a really good command of slow pushes leading into dives. I believe his jungler was actually Iconic or Zune. And whereas Spawn, he was definitely still a strong carry player, but he wasn't as full of a player. And I don't think he's as full of a player as someone like AndyBendy or Yeon or Shoryu is. So that's why I have him as the lowest ranked 80 carry.
And that again comes down to, like, what are you ranking on right now, right? If you're ranking on quality right now, I think it's pretty defensible to put Spawn fourth. If you're ranking on potential to become something, I think you'd rank Spawn higher. And that, I personally trended my rankings a little more towards potential. And that's why I had some of these players a little higher, even though I think they're probably not at a current power level the same as some of these other guys. But, that I think that's where some of the differences end up coming from. Rockery, thanks for hanging out. Let's see you around in the future.
I definitely agree with you. I do think Spawn could potentially be one of the top prospects here, actually. But moving on, I had Shady for my next spot. I believe this is 11th. I don't think support in general is very good, but I think that out of this class, I would probably have Otto the highest, like right now, but I see a decent amount of potential in Shady because he's one of the more mechanically inclined support players. His pike is insane. Uh, he has a very good mind for the map in my mind, which is something I really value in support players in general. But the biggest negative I have to put against him, and I've heard this repeated by so many players, is a lot of the things he does are completely illegal. He will straight up take fights that are unwinnable, and he will bluff the enemy over and over and over again. And a lot of the weakness we saw from Maryville were once you were capable of calling Shady's bluff, they would kind of collapse. Where Value and Niles were great carry players. If they fell behind in the early game, particularly off of Shady's wild antics, they had a hard time scaling back into the game because a lot of their players were so resource dependent. They had a very good, probably one of the best support jungle synergies alongside Supernova. Shady and Zune or Iconic would have worked really well together. They would always link up, roam together, and that was their real catalyst for the early game and the advantages that they would make and spread across the map. Particularly in top lane, Shady was well known for ganking from Niles around second back, first back, and Value, by extent, would prefer champions that were more self-sufficient, like the Ezreal. And he was one of the best Ezreal players in the Scouting Ground circuit. So far, I think Shady, one of the more abusable supports, but with the correct team, with a good jungler, I think that he has one of the higher current levels of play right now. And I do see more potential in him because he already has the mind for the map, which I think is something that's a little bit more difficult to teach because you can't force a support player to see something. They have to intuitively see it through experience alone, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair.
Moving up, I believe this is 10th. I have RoseThorn for jungle. Tim, okay. I know him somewhat well. I just realized you're both Tim, so I guess it works well.
I thought you were talking to me. Yeah, I
no, but yeah, double Tim synergy. I think the biggest negative I can weigh against RoseThorn is I think he's having a really hard time adapting to the meta right now. He's very well known for his Elise, his Lee Sin, these early game junglers, Rek'Sai, and I agree with your take that he's very raw. He doesn't have a whole lot of competitive experience yet. He's extremely aggressive. He's extremely mechanically inclined. But I think that he is one of the weaker junglers here right now because I don't think he's super capable of playing, the Kindred, the Graves, Lilia, etc. at the highest levels of competitive play, which his team is going to need in order to really pull through for the Scouting Grounds. And I definitely agree with your take where the first step is to learn how to play these champions, have a good birth of a champion pool, and then you're assigned to an academy team. I don't think that you can be assigned to academy team without knowing how to play a good variation of champions. Although that being said, I do think that he has the mechanics are there, the right clicks are there, the fundamental knowledge is there, but he needs to go further with that before he's really ready for academy in my mind. But maybe he'll show up and he'll just explode and he'll just be a very special case like someone like Blabber was or Spica. But I think that he needs a little bit more time, but he's definitely getting there. He's on the right track.
Yeah, so I think like it's really interesting to hear that you feel, you know, his Kindred isn't quite up to par. You know, the stuff that I've seen from him that I was most impressed with is honestly Kindred games. But it does like it connects a lot of dots for me to hear, you know, hey, Elise, Lee Sin, these kinds of things. Because he kind of, from what I saw, he kind of played Kindred like Elise, right? Like, wants to be right in your face, right in your jungle, looking for you to try to kill you. Like, okay, Kindred's not the best at that. And so that does connect some dots on, like, what I saw from him that wasn't quite right. And that he needed to kind of figure out. So, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it's the kind of thing that I think, that kind of stuff is so coachable to me, like, or at least it should be. And I hope that it will be. But
I agree. And
we'll
one of those things, since he is so bloodthirsty on champions like Kindred, I think that's going to be caught out by players who are more experienced in competitive, and that's sort of what we saw on Scouting Ground Circuit. TFT was the last place Scouting Ground Circuit team that competed in multiple events. So I think that's sort of indicative. Granted, RoseThorn was one of the better players on that team, but a lot of these bluffs are already being called by Scouting Ground Circuit teams. So I'm a little bit worrisome going into the actual Scouting Grounds event about RoseThorn and where he's going to go with these sort of champions that are in the meta that he will be playing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's keep it moving here.
Yeah, so
I've got about half an hour longer, and we've been going into some great depth, which I love. But let's make sure we actually get through the list.
All right, yeah, I think a lot of these players moving forward, I don't have to give a super broad explanation with. I have Copy next.
Okay.
I believe he is my third mid laner at the event. I think that he is definitely a pole belter sort of player. Yeah. I would like to see him on more melee champions, maybe. I don't think he's the most mechanically inclined player at the event. That being said, I definitely think he has one of the more well-developed pools of champions. Obviously, he mostly plays control mages. He was very well known for Silas in 2019. He hit like rank 1, not rank 1, but it was like rank 4 or something. He was very well known, and he kind of came out of nowhere in 2019. And while I think that this season hasn't been as good for him as 2019, I still think that he is definitely up there. Maybe
it's
needs a little bit more time.
Something like evaluating players' mechanics like this. Like I've never played at a high enough level to be really good at judging mechanics. I tend to rely a lot on kind of what others bring in here. I've heard others calling out his mechanics as being really strong, but maybe that he struggles to show it, things like that. So it's one of those things that is hard to pin down in my mind. Yeah,
definitely a good player, just not the best, but he definitely deserves to be here. Next up, I have Yeon, actually, his AD carry. So one of the interesting things I saw from Yeon was, if you take away all of the fasting Senna games, Yeon has the lowest gold share percentage out of all AD carries in the entire SGC by far. I think there might have been
that feeds into the idea of kind of the conservative play style.
Yeah, precisely. That being said, though, when he was known as Aki no Ki, this guy's Ezreal is absolutely crazy. He is a insane pop-off player. If you give him an inch, he will take a mile. So I was a little bit upset to a degree to see him so often on the fasting Senna, on just the Ashe. Carry is that definitely Ashe obviously almost always wins lane, but she's not the carry threat that something like an Ezreal is. She's not slippery. She doesn't have that mechanical expression. Whereas even Kalista, he was known as a very good Kalista player. He's known as a very good Misfortune player. All sorts of these champions, maybe not Misfortune as much, but these champions that have more skill expression. I think that obviously with Kenvi, NXI, Tenacity, someone has to bite the bullet for them. Yeah. And I think Yeon, 9 times out of 10, was that player. And he definitely showed that he was very capable of playing this weak side playstyle alongside Otto in the bottom lane. But I would like to see him separated from Otto, maybe on a more green support. And I would also like to see him maybe be the focal point of a team and see how he fares with both a more less experienced support and receiving more resources. And that's why I have him, I think I have him third AD carry, and I'd like to see a little bit more from him before I place him higher. But so far, I have a pretty good opinion of Yeon, and I'd like to see him bust out his Ezreal more, because that was really impressive with me. And right after him, you placed him so low, and I was so upset. I think AndyBendy is perennially underrated, and I'm definitely biased because he is on Radiance, but he was the best player, I believe, on Radiance.
But we're going to point out that I had him the highest of anybody at 11. Right.
Yeah, I think he deserves to be even higher, in my opinion. But I think one of the biggest slights against Andy was, I I don't know how the Mobalytics AI tracks him, but he always changes his name. He changed his name to Robot02, and right now his name is Check Attack Dog.
Yeah,
And
this may not have captured all his accounts, right? And that is one of the things that's really hard in evaluating players from solo queue is when they split their play across multiple accounts and some of them might not be identified.
he was also a Mango Dog or something of that sort. So he always changes his name. He was playing with Cow, and I know for a fact that Cow just didn't want to play. Like, he played because he had to, and he would feel bad if he were to abandon us, because none of the supports we were trying out really worked as well as Cow did, because we needed a vocal support, and there were no experienced free agent supports. So he wasn't really capable of showing his dominance in the laning phase as he was with Cow later into the season, as he was earlier into the season. Nothing against Johnson, Cow, but I think that with a support who was very highly motivated, who was chasing that Scouting Grounds dream, he could have shown more of his talent. Andy was a completely 1v9 player. I definitely think that he is the most stylistic variable player of all the AD carries. He's willing to play picks like Corky bottom lane, Ziggs bottom lane, Karthus bottom lane. I am almost certain we will see Karthus bottom lane. He's been talking to me. He's been talking to me a lot about it. But I think a lot of people are sleeping on AndyBendy, and I think he'll really show something fantastic this Scouting Grounds. Moving on, I have Rodov at 6th. I think Rodov is the most versatile top laner at Scouting Grounds by far.
Yeah, he definitely plays multiple styles, right? Like I was saying when I was talking through it myself, I started off seeing him as kind of this tank player, and then I saw he plays carries too. Hey, okay, and my opinion of him just went up quite a bit once I started to realize that.
Right. He's played stuff like the Kennen. He's played stuff like Ornn, Set. I can hardly think of champions that he doesn't play. I think he actually has the highest control of side lane out of all of the top laners there. I think even Niles has a tendency to screw up his side lanes. And I think a lot of it comes into Rodov being the most experienced player at Scouting Grounds and in the Scouting Grounds circuit in general. He was in Clutch Academy, which was a sort of weird team because they had Major Danger, Joey, and there were issues with coaching on that team. I recall most prolifically. They didn't have a coach for a lot of the time. And I just think Rodov, that veterancy, that versatility is something that I really value as a player.
Sure. Yeah, I buy that. I think, again, this is another player who I had higher than kind of the other pieces in this rank, and I think he could show up pretty well.
So for my top 5, number 5, I have Zune, actually. I have him second highest for all junglers. Maybe he deserves to be a little bit lower, but I think that ever since he was on Supernova back in 2018, back then it was 2 amateur teams that basically ruled everything. It was Supernova and Polar Ace, and they had Dragon Minkim, Polar Ace, and Dragon Minkim is now playing in Latin America North League. He's a pretty good jungler there, although I don't think he speaks Spanish. He's a Korean jungler. And Sound, or Iconic, was the top laner, jungler for Supernova. I think he was known as Pistol back then. And he was extremely aggressive. He had an extremely good mind for invade. He plays around priority extremely well. He's well known for champions like Lee Sin, Rek'Sai, these sort of early game catalyst junglers to really expedite the scaling of his laners. And I think him and Niles are just insane together. One of the strategies they would always pull out in the Scouting Ground circuit were Niles would play his Irelia, where him and Tenacity were the 2 players that were really capable of flexing that. Well, it wasn't a flex because neither of their mid laners play it. I think Copy might. Don't quote me on that. But the Sejuani Irelia, and Zune would just absolutely camp the living daylights out of the enemy top laner, and they would make them suffer. And with Shady coming top, with Sound coming top, I think that Sound has a very good mind for which laners he's supposed to play around, which laners he's supposed to camp, and he has an extremely high gank success rate, although not as high as NXI, which I have further up on this list. And I think just the capability of him playing around his laners and just playing towards his priority, he's a very complete jungler, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, I think you are one of the people that has given me that feedback that he should have been much higher on the list. And, again, being a player that I had a hard time getting much info on, and hearing this from multiple sources, I'm definitely inclined to buy into that.
Yeah, and I think this leads really well to number 4. Highest mid laner I have at the event is Yanbi. And
same story there.
Yeah,
exact same
Yanbi
story.
is absolutely insane in solo queue. He is the best Rise player, in my opinion. The 2 really big Rise players that come to mind from solo queue is Strumpist and Yanbi. And Yanbi mechanically probably is on he isn't as difficult to play against as Cat Evolved, but he's definitely getting there. He's on a similar tier where he will punish you for every single CS. He weaves in his auto attacks extremely well, where anytime you try to last hit and he has a bigger wave, he will walk up and he will auto attack you, and he will get his taste of blood, he will heal up, and he will just control his wave extremely well. Furthermore, he has a very expansive champion pool. He's willing to play the Orianna, Azir, Corki, Ryze, all of these carries. He's willing to play the Diana, which I think is a very underutilized pick. It especially counters picks like Zoe. We see it in European regional leagues like Prime League. I believe we even saw it at this Splits EU Masters. I don't know if it's announced yet, but there is rumors that Diplex is going to Misfits, and I think that this pick, Diana, will definitely be picking up traction. And if Yanbi does get an academy spot, which I am not so certain about, in particular because there are, I don't want to put words in Yanbi's mouth, but I've heard from other people that have known Yanbi that he is a extremely smart student. I believe he's pre-medicine or he's just going into medical school. So League of Legends isn't necessarily his ideal career trajectory right now.
Sure.
So, and that's a big reason why, if I recall, he isn't super into amateur. But mechanically, he is with the best of the best. And I think it means a lot that he can both balance a very rigorous school curriculum and being absolutely insane at League of Legends.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think this is a player that we're going to be talking about a lot by the end of the event, based on what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're now going to number 3, I believe, right?
Yeah, so I have Niles for number 3.
Okay.
So my reasoning for putting Niles a little bit lower is because I think, well, top 3 obviously isn't low, but
no, it's still very high, but not number 1, like, number 1, number 2, which is where typically we're seeing him.
I definitely agree with your assessment that Niles is sort of prone to overplaying, where despite his jungler not being around, despite Shady not being allowed he will just go for a play. He will just go for a trade that is absolutely illegal. He will push up all the way in the side lane. There was an incident where we played against Maryville Radiance, and Niles would always get punished by Nocturne to the point where they would have to ban Nocturne. They would have to ban Karthus. We should have been picking Twisted Fate, but I think Young wasn't really ready with that pick at that point. And they were just so punished disproportionately by globals. And the reason why is because Niles is very reckless with his side lane management a lot of the time. He plays Jace, he plays Camille, he plays all sorts of melee carries. And I think that while he is capable of playing tanks, he needs to get better at visualizing the enemy team composition and how they want to play into him, because obviously as Nocturne, he's very good. Nocturne is very good at shutting down a lot of these 1-3-1 compositions or 4-1 compositions, and he's very good at preying on sideliners or split pushers in general. And that was something that Niles had a lot of time, a lot of difficulty playing against.
Sure. Yeah.
So he had a bit of a trough near the middle of the season, but overall, I think that he is the best top laner at the event by a good margin. I think he's better than Rodov, and I'm very excited to see him. and I'm excited to see him in a more developed coaching environment. Nothing against Sue, obviously. He is a great coach, to my knowledge at least. But I'd like to see him with a very, very fleshed out coaching staff, because I think that he is one of the highest mechanical prospects here.
Yeah, definitely. And there is just a difference in type between academy coaching staffs and collegiate coaching staffs. Even if it's a good collegiate coaching staff, you just have more resources at a bit of a different level in academy. So yeah, no knock on anything at collegiate level. So I believe the two players we're sitting on now are NXI and Shoryu. Am I right?
Yes. And
so what are you going to reveal?
1 and 2 is a bit of a toss-up, but I actually have NXI as my number 2. And my reasoning is, I think... So, the swap
Winter's going to be so excited in chat, by the way.
Yeah, well, I love Winter, so I'm maybe a little bit biased towards Shoryu. I like NXI, but I think a bit of the swap working, obviously it didn't work extremely well.
Yeah, the Hunt Thieves next
they
roll
got
swap.
second.
Talking about Kenvi and Tenacity coming out of the lineup and NXI.
Yeah, so I do want to answer one of the questions, though. I definitely would have put Kenvi number 1 and Tenacity number 2, actually.
Sure.
But NXI on number 2 for me. I think that the swap works very well with a meta where NXI is known in solo queue for his Nidalee. Kenvi and NXI both known for their Graves, both known for these, kindred farming style junglers. They're super oriented towards farming, scaling up, and just 1v9 players. Obviously, all junglers in solo queue that hit super high ranks are either known for this style or super early game like RoseThorn.
It's just what works in solo queue.
Yeah, or you have players like Santorin, who is always super high ranked, who can play both. But these sort of junglers just came into meta, and they were meta at the time of the swap. So playing towards your jungler and playing towards NXI in turn, in this sort of solo queue style of jungle, made him very comfortable moving into a competitive 5v5 environment where he wasn't super experienced in before. I believe he was, I know he was on 2019 NA Scouting Grounds as a jungle prospect there. He obviously wasn't picked up. They preferred Winston over him. But I do think that this meta has been absolutely amazing for NXI, and he's shown that he is a jungler that is capable, more than capable, of being played towards when he has teammates that maybe aren't so capable of carrying, like maybe players like Fallen Bandit in top lane, who was mostly this weaker side tank player, or Copy, who isn't necessarily known for being a super hard carry. And I think Copy and Yeon definitely stepped up. But I think NXI was definitely the focal point of that team in the jungle, and the meta was just absolutely perfect for him.
Yeah, for sure. And the question then becomes, in terms of kind of future-proofing a player, what if they have to start playing Sejuani Gragas again, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
And how do they do then? Then suddenly Wiggly becomes the top 5 jungler in LCS again. And
yeah, the Mike Young effect, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I guess that leads very well into number 1, who I have Shoryu. And I think he is just the most complete. I think he was actually the best player on and I know Five Fire fans might fight me for that, but I think bottom lane was an absurdly stacked role for NA Scouting Grounds, and I think Scouting Grounds circuit, pardon. And I think even amongst players like AndyBendy, Spawn, Yeon, Tiax, Meech, I think that Shoryu definitely showed his worth, and he showed that versatility. He's capable of playing picks like Ezreal, Ashe, the Callista, all sorts of different picks. Like, he isn't constrained. Like, we saw teams like Mirage, where once Asilion wasn't capable of, once he had to play picks like Ashe, once he had to play picks like Caitlyn, stuff of that sort, he wasn't as effective as he was on the easier to play picks, I suppose, like Jhin, that kind of play themselves in a way. Sure. But I think that Shoryu has an insane amount of versatility, maybe not as much as a player like AndyBendy, because I haven't seen Shoryu go past the Syndra as far as mages go, but I think that mechanically Shoryu is at the tip top of his position. He is capable of playing weak side. He's capable of playing strong side. He's capable of side laning. He sets up his waves extremely well. He works well with Winter, who I think, nothing against Winter, but I think he is a little bit more of the stylistically restrained supports relative to a few of the supports there. I definitely think Winter was one of the best supports. But I think that Shoryu just was able to cooperate with Winter extremely well. And I know that there are some AD carries that probably wouldn't have been capable of fitting into Winter's playstyle as well.
Sure.
Winter was a support who roamed around a lot.
Winter says in chat that he plays with his feet, so don't worry about
it. He would be a fantastic Yumi player, I suppose.
Or if he wants to get into StarCraft Brood War, there's a player named Larva who famously put his foot on the keyboard for part of a StarCraft game.
I recall that GIF. But Winter, he would link up with Mike Young, and he would play for. They were another team that had a very good connected support jungle synergy. And I think that in spite of that, Shoryu would almost never fall behind in the laning phase. He was one of the strongest laning phase AD carries out of all of them there. I think the only one that was actually better, and the sample size is a lot smaller for this player, was Neo, who got moved up to Dignitas Academy very quickly.
And looked quite good, honestly.
Yeah, he looked amazing.
I think he's going by Asta now, isn't he? But
that's true. Yes,
but
Asta,
yeah, no.
that is his name.
If you can stand up on a similar level to Neo or Asta, then that's a pretty strong point in your favor, honestly.
Yeah,
he's looking like he could definitely keep rising.
Mm-hmm. I think once Asta left Scattering Out Circuit, I think Shoryu just took his place, and Shoryu was the new Asta. And
sure,
Anu had a little bit of a weird dip in performance near the middle of the season. They lost to Team Fish Taco, I believe, if I recall. But Shoryu was just 100% the focal point for his team. And he was a carry no matter if you gave him no side waves, no jungle pressure, and he was capable of carrying extremely harder than any AD carry if you were more inclined to give him those resources. So that's why I have him as number one. He is, in my mind, the best AD carry at the event.
I do think it's really interesting at this event. There's some really good players, stacked kind of through the top 10, and the fact that it's kind of difficult to pinpoint a number one is actually a really strong point in favor of, we've got, I would say probably 3 or maybe 4 players who could reasonably contest for that number one spot, and basically all in different roles. Maybe you'd talk about a couple of the junglers, or maybe you'd bring Yanbi or Copy into there, depending on kind of how you see it. But that's a really good sign for the overall talent pool at the event, that you don't have just this clear number one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Between Shoryu, NXI, and Niles, like number one, even Yanbi to an extent, I think number one is an extremely contested spot. And honestly, I wouldn't be upset at all if my power ranking is just completely blown out of the water, because it just means that a lot of the depth of solo queue, or just what these players are providing, goes beyond what I just have seen only in Scouting Grounds, or only in the solo queue games that I've played.
And I do think there are definitely other players who didn't end up qualifying into Scouting Grounds who are being very recognized on solo queue and are coming through kind of more back channels. So, it's always very interesting to see what players will do. And one of the great things about Scouting Grounds is they get this time with all of these coaches from 2 or 3 different teams, depending on who they got drafted onto. And they get this chance to gain a new style of feedback or a new quality of feedback or whatever it is, depending on, what they've been working with so far. And yeah, it gets really kind of exciting to see what changes from the start to the end of the event. So on that front, I'm going to be putting out as much content as I can each day of the event going on from here. Getting as much info as I can behind the scenes, talking to people, watching everything, and I can't wait to see kind of who stands out day to day and by the end of the event, and that's going to be fun. And Prussian, looking forward to getting more of your thoughts on that as well. Before we totally wrap this up, though, I do want to see if I can transfer this into the window properly. We'll just take a couple of minutes here to look at the actual Dragon Draft, because they've now released what they did kind of late last week, is they had the coaches of the teams. So Team Mountain was 100 Thieves, Dignitas, and FlyQuest coaching staff. Team Liquid and CLG teaming up for Team Ocean. Golden Guardians, Evil Geniuses IMT teaming up for Infernal, and Cloud9 and TSM teaming up for Team Cloud. And they did a snake draft. They haven't released the order of the picks for this draft, which is fine. I think they have some reasons for wanting to keep that under the hood. But if you're going to rank these 4 teams, and this is where we talk more about current level, right? Like I would lean in player power rankings towards talking about their potential and, what could they become and rank it based on that. But let's just talk about the actual event. Who's going to reach the finals on Saturday? Who's going to win it when you look at these 4 teams?
Yeah. So this is a controversial take because I've seen a lot of Infernal and maybe even a few Clouds, but I actually think Ocean overall is the strongest team, in my opinion.
Okay. So Rodov, NXI, Yanbi, Yeon, and Joey. Now, while you're talking through this, I got to look up because I have also given I'm going to see whether I've changed my mind at all, but I've given my thoughts in one form or another. If you were in Discord and knew how to read between the lines on the power of these teams. So you talk through why you think they're the best while I scroll up and find out what I actually said so I don't troll myself.
So stylistically, I see this team as perhaps either a side grade or an upgrade to 100X from Scouting Ground Circuit. So Rodov is actually very comparable to stylistically, I'm not talking about skill-wise, Fallen Bandit, and the fact that he is capable of playing weak side. I think he is obviously a better player than Fallen Bandit, but I think that Fallen Bandit was able to slot into 100 Thieves next very well because he was a versatile player and because he was a very experienced player. And I think Rodov has a similar level of experience, actually, and that versatility and just being a mechanical upgrade over a Fallen Bandit serves this team very well. Jungle NXI, obviously the same player. He is an extremely aggressive player. He is a very carry-oriented player, so you don't have to jump through so many hoops as far as translating your advantage goes, where you put the advantage on NXI, and NXI simply carries the game. You don't have to translate it anywhere else. Whereas no other jungler I see here can really do that, aside from maybe Tomio. I think Yanbi, he's capable of playing for priority. He is the most versatile mid laner here, in my opinion. And I am not extremely sure how NXI Yanbi will look, but I speculate that they will be the strongest 2v2 at the entire event, which is something, as a mid laner, I prioritize very much. And it helps that they're both carries, so no matter who is getting the advantage out of that 2v2, one of them will always be capable of carrying the game. Yeon and Joey. So I think Joey is one of the weaker supports here, but I do think that his experience, I have no clue how he is in communications or what his experience looks like as far as what he takes from that experience, right? Like, obviously he's been in an academy for 2 years, or maybe, I believe it's been 2 years. But I don't know if he's a very vocal support player or how similar he is to Otto. But Yeon was a player who worked extremely well with Otto, and I believe Otto would give him a lot of guidance through the laning phase and just helping him out since Yeon is such a novice player in general. So if Joey is capable of fulfilling a similar team niche to Otto, I think that Ocean is probably the best team, in my opinion.
Okay. So my thoughts on Ocean when I did my rankings, and I think when I did my initial thoughts the first time I saw these before they became public, I had a certain idea on them, and I think I sit pretty much the same. I might tweak it a little bit. I had Ocean ranked 3rd in my team rankings. I think part of that is the opinion I had of Yanbi at the time versus what I think now. A bit of a higher set of hopes for him now than I did before. But I'm not really sure what they're going to be able to bring through their bot lane. I'm not sure how the profiles of the players will line up. I think they could be pretty good, though. I think there's a pretty good argument to put them top 2 for sure. Who did you put in your second rank?
So it's really hard between Infernal and Cloud. I lean a little bit more towards Cloud. And my reasoning for that is I think Cloud actually has the weakest mid-jungle 2v2 at the event. just because I think Shrimps is a complete. He described himself as a jungle slave, and I think RoseThorn, as a player stylistically, is more. He works better with a mid laner who he can slave for, in my opinion. Where RoseThorn is most comfortable on these early game champions like the Rek'Sai, like the Elise, these early game catalyst junglers that aim to expedite his team's scaling. But on the same note, he has Niles and AndyBendy, which are two players that are extremely capable of ramping up and carrying the game for themselves. So I see Niles RoseThorn as an extremely large plus, but I see Shrimps as RoseThorn's mid laner as extremely negative at the same note. I see it's a team of extremes in my mind, where I'm not sure how good AndyBendy and Otto will work together. I really have no way of speculating. What do you think?
Yeah, so my full rankings, if I'm going to put it all together, right? This is what I said, and this is what I said before. So I said I had Infernal 1, Cloud 2, Ocean 3, Mountain 4. I think what I would tweak now, it's a little hard to say. I think I would maybe tweak Cloud. No, you know what? I'm not sure I would really change it. It is really hard to predict. I think I feel pretty stable on Mountain being ranked the fourth in those. And then the other three are really hard to predict. I think it's going to depend a lot on, how well the players manage to click together and find something that they can, keep drafting. If we're just talking about like who's actually going to win the event, right? It depends on who's going to find a set of team comps that they can reliably draft and play through, and that they suddenly just get really comfortable with it, right? And it's a short event and not a lot of time to kind of craft these detailed strategies and fallback plans and draft B, C, and D that we go for. So who finds that best draft A? I do think that there is a lot of potential for Niles to carry stuff through. I think AndyBendy is a little underrated going into it. I agree on your thoughts on the mid jungle. I think there's one of the big questions for how well Team Cloud is gonna perform in this event is whether RoseThorn finds his groove and can work with Shrimps to make something work. I think this event will probably devolve into quite a bit of team fighting, and at this level of play, we'll see a lot of skirmishing and team fighting. And so if Shrimps ends up on his Rumble, I think he actually can team fight very well on Rumble, and you should be able to. That way, I think I might revise them upwards a little bit. I had Infernal pretty high because I have a lot of faith in Shoryu, and I think I have a slightly higher opinion of Copy than a lot of others seem to. Like, people agree he's pretty good, but whether or not he's, best mid at the event kind of good, or is he behind Yanbi or whatever it's going to be, right? It's a little hard to say. But, I was really relying on their mid and bot side. And then Tomio being able to kind of play scrappy and play skirmishing and so on. Tony can also do that. I don't think like I do have some criticisms of Tony Top and his ability to succeed at a higher level. But at this level, I think he'll be able to do pretty well. Maybe unless he's playing against kind of Niles and depending what the junglers do against him, stuff like that. So I feel pretty good about Infernal.
Right. The one last thing I want to say about Cloud is Peter Zhang plus RoseThorn is a very, very dangerous combination. I see a lot of potential in that.
Sure.
If he gets a positional coach for jungle, I think RoseThorn probably has an extremely high ceiling.
And to be clear to those who aren't aware, Peter Zhang is a coach with TSM, so he's going to be potentially working with this team during the event. So I think I'm going to stick with my guns, because if I'm not sure how I'm going to revise it, I'll just stick with what I had before. I don't have a really strong reason to change it. So I'm going to stick with Infernal, Cloud, Ocean, Mountain. Where would you land it if you locked into an order of 4?
I would have to go against you, and I would say I think Ocean is number 1. I would put Cloud and Infernal is a little bit hard for me, but I would put Cloud over Infernal, and then
gotta commit.
Yeah.
So you go Ocean, Cloud, Infernal,
Cloud, then Infernal.
Okay. Cool. Well, it's going to be so much fun. The first official matches, I believe, are played at 4 p.m. Pacific tomorrow, Tuesday. And there'll be matches every day from there until the finals on Saturday. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Very exciting. Like I said before, I'm going to have kind of daily content out about this. Going to be streaming when I can about it and shooting some videos with it. After the event, I'm sure we'll look back at all of this and see, how have the rankings matched up with what we actually saw. who do we want to revise upward, who do we want to revise downward. And Prussian would definitely be happy to check in with you as this goes on, and some others as well. Hopefully be able to get some, maybe updated thoughts from Pacer Time as the event plays out, because he contributed his power rankings to the official Mobalytics site as well. So yeah, so excited for this event. I think it's going to be great. And I hope you all tune in and support the broadcasts as they come out. Watch the games as they're happening live. Come into the Oracle's Elixir Discord. I'm going to be driving as much discussion there as we can, and making sure we focus on that and celebrate it, because I think it's going to be great. And I think we could see quite a few of these players in Academy next year, so should be a lot of fun. And make sure you guys follow Prussian on Twitter. By the way, we've got his his tag on the screen. Prussian, anything else you want to shout out before we sign off here and move on?
Thanks for having me, and make sure you stick around for the Scouting Grounds draft at the end. I'll be on the analyst desk, so you can watch me and a few other League of Legends LCS analysts. Not me, obviously, but I'll be with them, and we'll go over the draft together. And awesome. I'm excited to see you guys there.
Do you know if that's happening like immediately after the finals, or is it the next day, or is that?
It is on the 14th. I believe it's after the finals, if I recall.
Yeah. Okay. That would make sense. Yeah, probably right after the finals. Awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, again, the games, the broadcast matches start Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific, and then there should be matches, I think, every day starting at 4, pretty much. The LCS official account tweeted it. So broadcast starts 4 p.m. Tuesday. Then there are matches starting at 11 and starting at 4, and I think running all the way through Wednesday, 4 p.m. Thursday, 11 a.m. Friday. So lots to watch. Stay tuned on Twitter. And we'll talk through it a lot together. All right, Prussian, thanks for hanging out.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, that was awesome. So yeah, I'm so excited for this. I've been waiting for Scouting Grounds for a long time. I've been working on the project for it for quite a long time and kind of keeping that under wraps. I just can't wait. And I'm gonna end the stream around now, I think. Move on to some other things that I'm going to work on. Got a little bit of work to do on this week's episode of Run It for Travis Gafford's YouTube channel. I do plan to post the recording of these conversations, both my own power rankings discussion and then the conversation with Prussian as well. That should go up on YouTube. I'm just going to have to export this and kind of trim it up a little bit and upload it there, so you can get the full, long, thorough discussion. And then also tonight, if you guys want to tune into Hotline League, if you watch that, I'm going to be the guest on Hotline League tonight with Travis and Mark Z. So that's going to be at 8 p.m. Pacific tonight, Monday. It should be a lot of fun as well. I hope we get to talk a little bit at Scouted Grounds. I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot of other things also. So don't call in with troll takes, because you don't want to put me in that position, do you? Be kind. No, that'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to sign off now. Thanks to everybody for watching, hanging out. Thanks for some of the people that chipped in, like Winter, and I think I saw RoseThorn briefly there, and I'm sure he's just in between scrims for the day. So good luck if you're still here, RoseThorn. Good luck to the event. I'm going to be watching your play closely. And yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. Going to sign it off there.